The air in the server room always tasted like ozone and impending doom. It was 6:45 a.m., a time when reasonable people are hitting snooze or yelling at their coffee makers, but I was already 2 levels underground, listening to the hum of the beast. That's what I called the legacy mainframe of Titan Core. It wasn't a computer anymore. It was a breathing, hateful organism held together by digital duct tape, prayers, and code I wrote back when Obama was still in his first term. I patted the cold steel of the rack like you'd pat a rabid dog that decided not to bite you today. You know the type of setup? Systems so old they run on spite and black magic, refusing to die just to inconvenience the new hires. Before I dive into the autopsy of how I eventually nuked this Fortune 500 company with a single sentence, give me a solid and smash that subscribe button and give this a like. It helps the algorithm more than whiskey helps my insomnia. Anyway, back to the grime. I sat down at my desk, a corner of the basement that HR forgot existed, and fired up my terminal. The screen flickered green, a comforting radioactive glow. I'm Cheryl, by the way, Senior Systems Reliability Engineer. In corporate speak, that means janitor of the internet. I fix the pipes when the C-suite flushes things they shouldn't. I've been here 14 years. I've survived 3 CEOs, a botched merger, and a ransomware attack that I stopped by literally pulling a plug out of the wall while the then CTO was hyperventilating in the fetal position. My morning routine was a ritual of survival. Check the load balancers. Clear the cache that gets clogged with the marketing department's 4K video uploads. Manually restart the SQL server that likes to hang itself every morning at 7:02 a.m. precisely. It was grunt work. It was invisible work. If I did my job perfectly, nobody knew I existed. If I messed up for a second, the stock price would dip, and some VP named Chad would be screaming into my voicemail. I took a sip of coffee that tasted like battery acid and resentment. It was quiet, peaceful, the fans' word. White noise choir singing the song of stability. But you can smell a storm coming, can't you? It's not in the air, it's in the metadata. I opened my email and saw it. The subject line was restructuring and exciting new horizons. Corporate code for we're firing the people who actually work and hiring consultants who wear vests. The email was from the CEO, announcing the appointment of a new chief operating officer. Brennan. I knew the name. Everyone knew the name. He was the CEO's son-in-law. A visionary, the email said. A disruptor. I Googled him. His LinkedIn profile picture looked like it was generated by an AI instructed to create smug frat boy who discovered Bitcoin. His experience listed a failed startup that sold artisanal ice cubes and a stint at a hedge fund his daddy owned. Now he was coming here, to Titan Core, to modernize operations. I lit a metaphorical cigarette. I quit the real ones 5 years ago, but my soul still chain smokes and looked at the beast. You hear that, old girl? I whispered to the server racks. We got a disruptor coming. The beast hummed a low, ominous note. The thing about systems like this is they don't like change. They are fragile ecosystems. They rely on specific, undocumented handshakes between servers that haven't been manufactured since 2010. I was the only one who knew where the bodies were buried because I was the one who dug the graves. I started scrolling through the company's Slack channels. The younger devs were already panicked. Is this the guy who tanked that crypto exchange? One message read. I heard he thinks the cloud is literal weather, another replied. I didn't chime in. I never did. I just watched the traffic flows. But then I saw a notification on my admin panel. Someone was poking around the permissions hierarchy. Someone with a brand new account, granted super admin status just 10 minutes ago. User, Brennan Ops. He was already touching things. He was changing the read/write access on the archival drives. He was like a toddler wandering into a nuclear reactor, pressing buttons because they were shiny. I felt that cold, familiar knot in my stomach. The check engine light of my intuition was flashing red. I didn't block him. Not yet, that would be insubordination. Instead, I opened a command line on my private, air-gapped laptop. Initiate backup hidden sector exe if this guy wanted to play God, he was going to need a Bible. And unfortunately for him, I was the only one who could read the scripture. The office upstairs was waking up. I could hear the elevators dinging, delivering the fresh-faced marketing grads and the sales sharks. I had no idea that the ground beneath their feet was being held together by me and a server that needed a restart every 24 hours or it would vomit data all over the firewall. I leaned back, cracking my knuckles. This wasn't going to be a normal Tuesday. I could feel the electricity changing, the voltage spiking. The comfortable routine was dead. The infestation had arrived. The all-hands meeting was held in the glass-walled atrium on the 40th floor, a space that smelled of expensive cologne and fear. I stood in the back, near the exit, wearing my standard uniform, a black hoodie that said I'm busy in binary code and jeans that had seen more server maintenance cycles than a wash cycle. Then he walked in. Brennan. In person, he was worse than his JPEG. He looked like he was assembled in a factory that makes Ken dolls for divorced moms. His suit was so blue it hurt my retinas. So tight I wondered if his circulation was cut off to his brain, which would explain a lot. He bounced onto the stage, grabbing the microphone like he was about to drop a mixtape, not a quarterly projection. "What's up, Titan Core?" he yelled. Silence, a few nervous coughs. "Energy, I love the energy." He lied, flashing veneers that cost more than my mortgage. "Look, I'm not here to be a boss. I'm here to be a catalyst. My father-in-law, excuse me, our CEO, brought me in to trim the fat, to make this beast lean, agile, disruptive." I cringed so hard I think I pulled a muscle in my neck. Trim the fat. That's MBA speak for fire the people who know how the product works. He started clicking through a PowerPoint presentation that was 90% stock photos of people high-fiving on mountains and 10% graphs that made no mathematical sense. Then, a slide popped up titled, Legacy Anchors. It showed a picture of a server room. My server room, with a big red X over it. "We are moving to 100% cloud integration by Q3. Brennan announced, pumping his fist. "No more dungeons, no more dusty hardware. We are going serverless." The room applauded politely. The sales team cheered because cloud sounds sexy to clients, but the engineering team looked at each other with the eyes of soldiers watching a general order a cavalry charge into a minefield. I felt a gaze burn into me. Brennan was looking at the back of the room. He pointed a finger, a perfectly manicured finger, right at me. "And it starts with culture," he said, his voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. "We need to move away from the old guard mentality. The people who hoard information. The people who say it can't be done. In this new era, impossible is just a suggestion." He was talking about me. Everyone knew it. I was the old guard. I was the hoarder. After the meeting, the atmosphere in the office shifted. It was like the air pressure dropped before a tornado. I went back to the basement, my hands shaking slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of pure, unadulterated rage. "Serverless," I muttered to the beast. "He wants to go serverless on a system hard-coded to a mainframe from 1998. It was physically impossible without rewriting 3 million lines of code. It would take 5 years and $50 million. Brennan wanted it done in 3 months. I sat at my desk and watched the logs. Brennan wasn't done. An hour later, I got a notification. My admin rights were being altered, not revoked, that would be too obvious, but streamlined. I could no longer access the budget spreadsheets. I was locked out of the hiring portal. Then, he showed up. Didn't take the elevator. He took the stairs, probably to get his steps in for his Apple Watch. He breezed into my server room without knocking, sniffing the air with disdain. "So this is the brain," he said, looking at the racks like they were piles of dirty laundry. "This is the infrastructure," yes, I said, not turning around from my screens. "It's loud," he complained, "and hot. Why do we pay for this real estate? Amazon Web Services could host all of this for pennies." I spun my chair around. "Brennan, with all due respect, the latency on the transaction controls requires on-site hardware. If you move this to the cloud without rebuilding the kernel, the latency will jump from 2 milliseconds to 200. The trading bots will crash. We will lose millions in seconds." He chuckled. A condescending, patrician chuckle. "You tech people, always so dramatic. The sky is falling, the sky is falling. You know, Cheryl, sometimes you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet." "This isn't an omelet," I said, my voice flat. "It's the global financial transaction layer for our biggest clients." He stepped closer, invading my personal space. He smelled like expensive moisturizer and arrogance. "Maybe that's the problem, Cheryl. You're too attached. You're hugging the machine. I need people who can let go." He tapped my desk twice. Tap, tap. "Get me a migration plan by Friday." And try to smile. "You look like you're at a funeral." He walked out. I stared at the empty doorway. He was right about one thing. I was at a funeral. I just didn't know whose yet. I turned back to my terminal. I didn't start the migration plan. Instead, I opened a hidden partition on my drive. I started backing up personal emails, performance reviews from the last decade, and every single commendation I'd ever received. Then I did something else. I wrote a small script. Simple logic loop. It monitored my Active Directory status. If my account was disabled, it would execute a command, nothing destructive. No, I wasn't a vandal. I was a reliability engineer. I just turned off the automatic stabilizers. The scripts I wrote to keep the beast from eating itself, I tied them to my user login. If I was there, the system worked. If I wasn't, well, gravity is a harsh mistress. By Wednesday, the writing wasn't just on the wall. It was spray painted in neon across the lobby. Brennan was on a warpath, and I was the village he intended to burn down to prove his strength. It started with a calendar invite, team synergy and modernization workshop, mandatory attendance, 2:00 p.m. I walked into the conference room. It was filled with the younger dev team, kids who were smart but terrified. Brennan sat at the head of the table, flanked by a woman from HR, Linda. Linda was nice, in the way a golden retriever is nice, but she had the backbone of a chocolate eclair. "Great, we're all here," Brennan said, not looking up from his phone. "Let's talk about resistance." He projected a graph on the screen. It tracked ticket resolution time. My name was at the bottom, highlighted in red. "Cheryl," he said, smiling like a shark smelling chum. "Care to explain why your resolution times are triple the team average?" The room went dead silent. The tickets he was referring to were complex, level 4 system failures that required rewriting kernel code. The team average was resetting passwords and unjamming printers. Those are infrastructure rebuilds, I said calmly. They aren't 5-minute fixes. If I rush them, data corrupts. Excuses, Brennan sighed, shaking his head at the group. See this? This is what holds us back. It's too hard, it's too complex. We need speed, we need velocity. Cheryl, I'm putting you on a performance improvement plan. A PIP, the corporate kiss of death. It's not a plan to improve, it's a paper trail to fire you without a lawsuit. Linda has the details, Brennan added, waving his hand dismissively. You'll report your hourly activities directly to me. If we don't see velocity increase by Friday, we'll have to reevaluate your fit. I looked at Linda. She looked down at her notepad, unable to meet my eyes. That was the moment. The snap. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the sound of a dry twig breaking in a winter forest. I realized I wasn't fighting for my job anymore. I was fighting for my dignity. And dignity in my line of work is expensive. Understood, I said. My voice was so level it scared me a little. I didn't argue. I didn't scream that I built the platform he was standing on. I just nodded. Brennan looked disappointed. He wanted a fight. He wanted the angry old woman to yell so he could justify his narrative. I denied him the pleasure. Great. Meeting adjourned, he said, bored now that the blood sport was over. I walked back to the basement. The humiliation burned, a hot, prickly heat under my skin, but beneath the heat was ice. Cold, hard logic. If he wanted velocity, I'd give him velocity. I sat at my terminal. The PIP required me to document every minute of my day. Fine. I opened a new document. But while I typed meaningless updates about optimizing synergy, my other hand was working on the console. I accessed the load balancing subsystem. This was the heart of Titan Core, the traffic cop that directed millions of requests. It relied on a custom algorithm I wrote 7 years ago called the dam. It held back the flood of data and released it in manageable streams. The dam required a manual key reauthorization every week. It was a security feature I implemented to prevent automated hacks. If the key wasn't turned, the dam opened wide. I usually reauthorized it on Friday mornings. It was muscle memory. I looked at the code. If user auth equals Cheryl admin initiate failsafe, I deleted the initiate failsafe line. I replaced it with return null. Basically, if the system checked for me and didn't find me, it wouldn't sound an alarm. It wouldn't switch to backup. It would just do nothing. It would let the floodgates open without a valve. I saved the changes. I buried the audit log deep in a folder named System 32 Old Do Not Delete, the one place no millennial cloud architect would ever dare look. I wasn't sabotaging the system. I was just removing myself from the equation. Brennan said he wanted to remove the legacy anchors. Well, he was about to find out that the anchor is the only thing stopping the ship from drifting into the rocks. Thursday passed in a blur of passive-aggressive emails. Brennan sent me messages like, "Did you update the velocity tracker? And let's pivot on that attitude." I replied with tracker updated, pivoting now. I was a ghost haunting my own office. I packed my personal belongings slowly. The picture of my dog, the framed certificate for uptime excellence from 2015, my lucky screwdriver. I put them in my backpack bit by bit so my desk looked the same at a glance but was hollowed out inside, just like the company. Thursday afternoon brought the auditors. Brennan had hired an external firm, Strat Edgeyes, yes, with a capital E in the middle, to map the infrastructure redundancies. In reality, they were hitmen with laptops. Two guys, barely out of college, wearing vests that looked like they were made of recycled plastic bottles and bad decisions. They came into my server room carrying lattes and an air of unearned superiority. "Hey, we're here too?" Visualize the stack, one of them said. His name tag said Kyle. Of course it was Kyle. "Visualize away," I said, gesturing to the racks. "Don't touch the red cables or the blue ones. Actually, just don't touch anything." Kyle laughed nervously. "Right, so Brennan says this is all legacy junk. We're just trying to see what we can migrate to a Kubernetes cluster by Monday." I almost choked on my gum. "Monday? You want to migrate a 20-year-old COBOL-based transaction engine to a containerized environment in 3 days?" "Yeah," Kyle said, typing something on his iPad. "Brennan says it's just about shifting the mindset." I watched them work. It was like watching monkeys try to defuse a bomb with a banana. They were taking pictures of the wrong servers. They were mapping the backup drive as the primary core. They noted down the air conditioning unit as a redundant power supply. I could have corrected them. I could have pointed out that the cable they were leaning on controlled the connection to the Federal Reserve. I didn't. I sat there, sipping my lukewarm water and played solitaire. Brennan came down an hour later to check on his troops. "How's the audit going, boys?" "Great," Kyle chirped. "We've identified like 40% redundancy. You can definitely cut this department down. The hardware is basically running itself." "Music to my ears," Brennan said, shooting me a triumphant look. "See, Cheryl? Fresh eyes, they see solutions where you see problems. They see an AC unit and think it's a battery," I said quietly. "What was that?" Brennan snapped. "Nothing, just admiring the synergy." They left at 5 o'clock p.m. I stayed. This was the final night. The audit was the nail in the coffin. They had the data they needed to terminate me. Kyle's report would say I was redundant. I did my rounds. I walked the aisles of the server room one last time. The hum was louder tonight, the beast knew. I stopped at the master console. I had one last knot to untie. The cooling system. It was automated, but the sensors were finicky. They had a tendency to read false hot and shut down the servers to prevent damage. I had written a bypass script that cross-referenced the temperature with a secondary sensor before allowing a shutdown. It prevented false alarms. I disabled the cross-reference. Now the system was purely literal. If a sensor glitched and said fire, the system would kill the power. No questions asked. No human verification. It wasn't sabotage. It was factory settings. I was just returning the equipment to its original, pristine, stupid state. I wiped my local browser history. I cleared the command line logs. I made sure my digital fingerprints were scrubbed from the last 48 hours of activity. As I left the building that night, the security guard, old Mike, waved at me. "Working late again, Cheryl?" "Last time, Mike," I said. "Last time." "Heading out for vacation?" he asked, smiling. "Something like that," I said. "Going to watch a demolition derby." I drove home in silence. My heart wasn't racing anymore. The anger had crystallized into something heavy and solid in my chest. I wasn't sad. I was a mechanic watching a driver cut the brake lines because he thought they added too much weight. I just hoped he was wearing his seatbelt. Spoiler, he wasn't. Friday morning, the IDs of March in a climate-controlled office park. I woke up before my alarm. I didn't put on my hoodie today. I put on a blazer. I brushed my hair. I put on lipstick. A shade called Scorched Earth. If I was going out, I was going out looking like the professional they claimed I wasn't. I arrived at 8 o'clock a.m. The termination invite was already in my inbox. Quick sync with Brennan and HR. 9 o'clock a.m. They always do it on Friday mornings. It's supposed to minimize office drama. They think if they fire you on Friday, you'll just go home and drink instead of coming back with a lawyer. I walked into the break room carrying a Tupperware container. Chocolate chip cookies, homemade. I'd baked them at 4 a.m. because I couldn't sleep and because irony is my favorite flavor. I set them on the communal table with a note. "Thanks for the memories, Cheryl." The junior devs swarmed them. Poor kids. They looked tired. They sensed the tension. "These are great, Cheryl," one of them said, a guy named Dave who I'd once taught how to recrimp a CAT5 cable. "You okay?" "You look dressed up." "I'm fantastic, Dave," I said, smiling. "Just a big day, big changes." I walked the floor. I wasn't just walking, I was verifying. I looked at the server status monitors on the wall. All green for now, the dam was holding. The cooling sensors were stable. The beast was sleeping. I ran into Brennan near the coffee machine. He looked energized, practically vibrating with caffeine and power. He saw my blazer and sneered slightly. "Dressed for an interview?" he asked, voice low so nobody else could hear. "Always dress for the job you want," I replied. "I want a job where competence is the currency, not the enemy." He laughed. "Save the speeches for the exit interview, Cheryl." 9 o'clock a.m. "Don't be late." "I'm never late, Brennan. That's the thing about me. I run on time." I went back to my desk. I had 10 minutes. I opened my email client one last time. I drafted a message to the team, not the executives. "Engineers. Subject, the keys to the kingdom body. The documentation you need doesn't exist in the wiki. It's in the comments of the code. If the system hangs, check the logs. If the logs are empty, check the voltage. If the voltage is fine, pray, good luck, you're going to need it." I set it to send on a delay. 9:15 a.m. I looked at my badge. Cheryl S., Senior SRE. I took a deep breath. The air in the basement still smelled of ozone. I was going to miss that smell. It was the smell of a machine working hard. But machines break. And sometimes you have to let them break so the people operating them realize they aren't toys. I checked my watch. 8:58 a.m. Time to go upstairs. Time to hand Brennan the rope he had been begging for. The 9 o'clock a.m. quick sync wasn't in a private office. Brennan, in a move of spectacular arrogance, decided to do it in the glass-walled conference room right in the middle of the open plan office. He wanted an audience. He wanted the team to see the execution. He wanted to display the head on the pike. I walked in. Linda from HR was there, looking like she wanted to melt into the carpet. Brennan was standing, leaning against the table, arms crossed. The blinds were open. The entire floor could see us. "Have a seat, Cheryl," Brennan said. "Loud enough for the people outside to hear." I remained standing. I prefer to stand. Brennan shrugged. "Suit yourself. Let's make this quick. Based on the audit findings and your refusal to adapt to the new velocity metrics, we've made a decision." He paused for dramatic effect. He looked around the office, making sure eyes were on him. "Congratulations, Cheryl, you're terminated, effective immediately." He smirked. It was an ugly thing, that smirk. It was the smile of a man who has never fixed a flat tire in his life, telling a mechanic how to drive. Linda slid a packet across the table. "Cheryl, this outlines your severance?" I didn't look at the packet. I didn't look at Linda. I looked straight at Brennan. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my security badge, and placed it gently on the table. Click. The room was silent. Outside the glass, the typing had stopped. Everyone was watching. "You think this is about old versus new?" I said, my voice clear and calm. "You think I'm a roadblock, but I haven't been blocking you, Brennan. I've been carrying you." We don't need carrying, Brennan scoffed. We have the cloud. You have a marketing brochure, I corrected. I have the keys, I checked my watch. 9:03 a.m. You have exactly 10 minutes, I said. Brennan frowned. 10 minutes for what? To pack? 10 minutes before the system fails, I said. Load balancers require a manual handshake at 9:10 a.m. I'm the only one who has the key. I'm the only one who knows the sequence. If that handshake doesn't happen, the transaction queue backs up. When it backs up, the sensors overheat. When they overheat, the safeties trip. And when the safeties trip, well, you'll see, I smiled. It was the first genuine smile I'd had in weeks. Tell your father-in-law I said good luck. Brennan laughed, a nervous, barking sound. A threat? Linda, did you hear that? She's threatening sabotage. It's not sabotage, I said, turning to the door, it's reliability. And you just fired the reliability engineer. I walked out. I didn't run, I walked. I passed the rows of desks. I saw Dave. I gave him a small nod. He looked terrified. I walked to the elevator. I pressed the button. Brennan was shouting something behind me, probably telling security to escort me out. The elevator doors opened. I stepped in. As the doors closed, I saw Brennan staring at me, his face red, his hands gripping the table. He checked his watch. I checked mine. 9:05 a.m., 5 minutes remaining. I walked out of the building and into the bright, harsh sunlight of the parking lot. I didn't get in my car. I walked across the street to Joe's Diner, a greasy spoon with a clear view of the Titan core lobby. I ordered coffee and a stack of pancakes. Celebrating? The waitress asked. Retirement? I said. I'm officially retired. I put my phone on the table. 9:09 a.m. I poured syrup on my pancakes. 9:10 a.m. Showtime. Minute 1, 9:11 a.m. It started small. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it. Inside the server room, the first heartbeat signal from the load balancer would have pinged out, looking for my authorization. Ping, no answer. Ping, silence. In the office, the HR system likely froze. Linda was probably trying to process my termination paperwork, and the screen would have just spun that little blue circle of death. Annoying, but not fatal. Someone probably made a joke about the Wi-Fi. Minute 3, 9:13 a.m., the dam breaks. Without the handshake, the incoming traffic from Asia and Europe, which hits peak volume right about now, slammed into the primary SQL cluster. From my booth in the diner, I saw the first sign. Hubby lights flickered. The building automation system shares a bus with the overflow data logs, a terrible design flaw I had ticketed to fix in 2018 but was denied budget for. When the logs overflowed, the voltage sagged. The automatic doors to the lobby slid open and stayed stuck. I took a bite of my pancake. Delicious. Minute 5, 9:15 a.m., Slack integrations failed. The internal chat would have gone dark. No more GIFs. No more synergy updates. Then the keycard system rebooted. I saw a group of sales guys trying to get back in from a smoke break. They tapped their cards. Red light, tapped again. Red light. They started banging on the glass. Locked out, I whispered. Just like the logic. Minute 7, 9:17 a.m., the investor call. I knew Brennan had a Zoom call with the institutional investors scheduled for 9:15. He was going to demo the new, faster interface. By now, the transaction latency would have spiked from 2 ms to 4,000 ms. The demo screen would be frozen. The investors would be asking why the stock ticker on the screen was showing data from yesterday. Brennan would be sweating. He'd be hitting refresh, but refresh sends another query, and another query adds to the pileup. He was digging his own grave with the refresh button. Minute 8, 9:18 a.m., the panic. I saw movement in the lobby. People were running, not walking. Running? The CTO, a man named Henderson who mostly played golf, was unreachable. He was on a flight to Cabo. I knew this because I managed the executive calendars. I saw Brennan appear in the lobby. He was frantic. He was yelling at the security guard. He was pointing at his phone. My phone sat on the table. Silent. He didn't have my number. He never asked for it. HR had it, but the HR system was down. Irony is a cruel mistress. And at 9:19 a.m., finance servers flash red. The trading bots. These are automated scripts that buy and sell based on micro-fluctuations. When the latency hit critical mass, the bots panicked. They started auto-liquidating positions to save capital. Titan Core wasn't just crashing. It was actively selling off its own assets because the safety protocols thought the world was ending. The stock price. I pulled up Google Finance on my phone, thank God for 5G. Titan Core Titan, minus 4.5% in the last 3 minutes. Millions of dollars evaporating. I ordered a side of bacon, extra crispy, I told the waitress, like my career. Brennan was now pacing in circles in the lobby. He was holding a laptop, looking for a signal, looking for a savior. He looked like a man trying to bail out the Titanic with a teaspoon. I watched him. I didn't feel guilt, I didn't feel glee. I felt the cold, hard satisfaction of physics. Action meet reaction. You remove the brakes, you crash the car, you fire the engineer, you crash the company. 9:20 a.m., minute 10. The thermal shutdown. Minute 10, 9:20 a.m. The beast finally reacted to the abuse. The CPU temperatures across the rack hit 95 degrees Celsius. The cooling sensors, stripped of my false positive logic check, screamed fire. It happened all at once. The lights in the Titan core building went out. Not just a flicker, a hard kill. The emergency generators kicked in with a roar and a puff of black smoke from the roof, but they only powered the emergency exits and the elevators. The data center, dead, the screens, black, the cloud, evaporated. Inside the lobby, it was chaos. Even from across the street, I could see the silhouette of panic. People using their phone flashlights. Brennan ran out the front doors, gasping for air. He looked wild, his tie was undone. My phone finally buzzed, a known number. I let it ring. It stopped. It buzzed again. I picked it up but didn't speak. Cheryl, Cheryl, is this Cheryl? It was Brennan. He must have screamed at Linda until she found my number in a physical file cabinet. Cheryl, the system is down. Everything is down. The investors are screaming. The stock is tanking. What did you do? I didn't do anything, Brennan. I said, dipping a piece of bacon in syrup. I was terminated. I left the building. Remember, fix it, you have to fix it, he shrieked. He sounded like a child who broke a vase. I can't, I said, I don't work there. I'm a security risk, unauthorized access. You know the policy. I will rehire you. Right now, double your salary, no, triple anything. Brennan, I said, my voice dropping an octave. You wanted to trim the fat. You wanted to modernize. This is what modernization looks like when you don't understand the foundation. You built a penthouse on a sinkhole. Please, he whimpered. My father-in-law is here. He just pulled up. I looked down the street. Sure enough, a black Mercedes S-Class screeched to the curb. The CEO, Mr. Titan himself, stepped out. He looked furious. He walked right up to Brennan and slapped the laptop out of his hands. I could almost hear the smack from here. I'm sorry, Brennan. I said into the phone, I'm busy. I'm watching a demolition derby. I hung up. I watched the CEO yelling at Brennan. Brennan was pointing at the building, then at the sky, making excuses. The CEO wasn't having it. He pointed a finger at Brennan's chest, the same aggressive finger Brennan had pointed at me on Tuesday, and poked him hard. Then the CEO looked around. He looked at the dead building. He looked at the employees milling around on the sidewalk, confused and useless. Someone whispered something to him, probably Dave, good old Dave. The CEO turned and scanned the street. He looked at the diner. He saw me. I raised my coffee mug in a toast. He didn't wave back. He just slumped. He knew. He knew that his son-in-law had just cost him probably $50 million in market cap in 20 minutes because he was too arrogant to read a manual. The beast was dead, and only I knew the CPR sequence to bring it back. But I wasn't a doctor anymore. I was a spectator. And the show was magnificent. By that evening, the story had leaked. Someone, maybe me, maybe Dave, had posted a video of Brennan yelling, "We don't need her," from a week prior on TikTok. It went viral. #Titan crash was trending on Twitter. The stock had closed down 12%. The board called an emergency meeting at 6 p.m. I was at home watching Danny DeVito compilations and drinking a glass of Pinot Noir that cost more than my weekly grocery budget used to. At 8 p.m., my phone rang. It wasn't Brennan. It was the CEO. Cheryl, he said, no preamble, no how are you? Mr. Henderson, I replied, we need you back. I was terminated for cause, sir. Resistance to modernization. Brennan has been reassigned, the CEO said. Is looking for opportunities in the nonprofit sector, effective immediately. That's a shame, I said. He had such great energy. Cheryl, cut the crap. The database is corrupted. The backups are encrypted with a key we can't find. We are bleeding money. How soon can you be here? I took a sip of wine. This was it, the moment you dream of in the shower after a bad day. I don't want my job back, I said. Silence on the line. What? I don't want to be an employee. Employees get fired. Employees get pips. Employees get told they are dinosaurs. Then what do you want? I want to be a consultant, I said. Independent contractor. My company is called Legacy Solutions LLC. I just registered it an hour ago. Fine, whatever. What's your rate? My previous hourly rate, I said, multiplied by 5, with a guaranteed 6-month retainer paid upfront, and a clause that states I report only to the board. No managers, no coup. No Brennans, he choked. 5 times, that's extortion. No, I said calmly, that's the price of the key. And the price of the 10 minutes it will take me to type it in. You aren't paying for the typing, sir. You're paying for the 14 years of knowing what to type. He sighed, a long, defeated sigh. Can you be here in an hour? I can be there in 30 minutes. Have the check ready. I drove back to the office. The lights were still out. The lobby was filled with technicians running around with flashlights. When I walked in, the sea parted. The sales guys who had ignored me for years looked at me like I was a wizard. I walked past the CEO. He handed me an envelope. I checked it. It was the retainer. I walked down to the basement. It was dark, silent, and hot. I hooked up my laptop to the console. I typed in the restore command. I entered the encryption key. Danny DeVito is the god of chaos 123? Don't ask. I re-enabled the thermal sensor logic. I executed the initiate handshake script. The fans spun up. The lights on the rack turned from angry red to soothing green. The overhead lights in the basement flickered on. Upstairs, I heard a cheer. The systems were coming back online. The bleeding had stopped. I sat there for a moment, listening to the beast purr. It sounded happy. It missed me. I lit a virtual cigarette. I'm still here. Brennan is gone, last I heard. He's finding himself in Bali. The new COO is terrified of me. He asks permission before he even enters the basement. I drink my coffee. I do my rounds. I keep the world spinning. They think they run the company. They think the cloud is magic. But down here in the dark, we know the truth. The world runs on duct tape, spite, and the people who know where the off switch is. And if you ever forget that, well, you have 10 minutes to figure it out.